Good evening, everyone. I think for the vast majority of you, no introduction is necessary, but there are some of you who may not know Naya Swami's Dharmadas and Nirmala, even though they have been with Ananda since the 1970s. Still, some of you have not. So for those of you who have not, they're now the spiritual directors, colony leaders at Ananda Sacramento. But I was talking with Nirmala today, and I realized they've, other than Portland, right? I think maybe you were even at Portland for some, no. Other than Portland, they've been a major part of every Ananda community. In fact, I said to her, where was the first place you went away from the village? And she said, Palo Alto. And I didn't know that. So, yeah, it was a very long time ago. It was Atherton, which interestingly, I spent a lot of time there, so we started sharing some memories. But they've traveled from community to community, really bringing a lot. I could start saying Nirmala had so much to do with the music ministry and all of the whatever they've done, just list them. But the truth is, they've been an essential part of every community, and maybe most importantly, really worked side by side with Swamiji all of these years. So that's a lot of years since the 1970s. Nirmala working very closely with him with music and really helping to write some of the books. I mean, really get some of the music down, not write the music, but no, I know. It's Swamiji's. And I remember years ago, Asha said to me once about Dharmadas, she said, he was always the person who both anticipated what Swamiji would need and was perfectly in tune with Swamiji's needs all the time. That was such a beautiful thing to hear. And then they actually spent 9 years in India, first in Gurgaon, then down in Pune, but also traveling a lot. So within India, sharing the teachings, I think all by way of saying, it's a blessing for us to have them here and to share that vibration that they've been attuning themselves to for decades now, really probably much of their adult lives. So we're very happy to have you here, very much looking forward to the whole weekend, but certainly tonight hearing both music and stories. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Shanti.
So it seems to me that an evening of anything around Swamiji should begin with a song of Swamiji's. So we're going to color slightly outside the lines, and a song is going to turn into almost a chant, which means you can join us. And the song is Life is a Dream. So maybe we'll sing that as an opening together. So join us, or wait to the second time through the song. We'll sing it twice through as you feel to, but don't be shy. I know there's quite a few of you who know it inside out and backwards. So. I say song as a chant because we're going to have the harmonium playing along too here. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Life is a dream, time like a stream, carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere. Love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above grief's stairs to the sky. Love is a star though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Thank you for joining us with that.
I feel like we should start with a prayer anyway, so let's do that. Let's pray together. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
beloved friend God,
beloved friend God,
great masters,
great masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Mary Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yogananda ji,
Paramhansa Yogananda ji,
all saints and sages,
all saints and sages,
beloved Swamiji,
beloved Swamiji,
we invoke your presence,
we invoke your presence,
your love,
your
your blessings,
blessings,
flow through our hearts,
flow through our hearts,
our words, our lives,
our lives,
in blessing to others.
and blessing to others.
We are thine.
We are thine.
Be thou eternally ours.
Be thou eternally ours.
Om, peace. Amen. So would you like to start, lest I take all your good stories?
No, you can go ahead.
So, Shanti was talking a little bit about our time in India, and I'm sure we will have quite a number of stories come up in that connection because we were in the same house with Swamiji for virtually all of that time. And so a lot of just sort of daily interaction with him, which was kind of unheard of. You know, if we think of the broad, I contemplated this. Should I move this thing up closer to my, up higher? Okay. Sounds like it's kind of at the edge there. After Swamiji left the body, I remember sort of realizing a number of things that I hadn't remembered or I hadn't really ever thought of before about his life. And one of them was that he never really lived in a city for very long. I mean, he had an apartment in San Francisco for a little while as Ananda was beginning. This is before my time in the late 60s. But if you think of the broad span of his life, 80 odd years, that was the only time that I could think of where he lived in a city. And other than when we got to India and we lived on the outskirts of Delhi, which was a great challenge in many ways. So that was one little thing that struck me, is that Swamiji actually, although he appreciated what a city can bring, his life was out in the country. His life was more in nature, even though he kind of preferred his nature a little more tamed, shall we say. He kind of preferred the Bouchard Gardens variety of nature as opposed to the wild Scotch broom and poison oak of Ananda Village, which turned into the Crystal Hermitage, which was, again, a way of integrating beauty into the natural surroundings. But I remember feeling in the years with Swamiji that his consciousness was whatever it needed to be at that time. So I'll just give you an example. He was extremely impersonal, even with himself. I mean, you've probably all heard this, the quotation, and maybe it was even Asha who captured it. Kriyananda is an event for which he is responsible. You know, it's like he could put himself in the third person instantly, which of course meant that everybody else could also be in the third person as well. And yet, when the occasion required, he could also be extraordinarily personal. And it was when it required, and it wasn't always, it wasn't even necessarily very often. But in the first months and even years when we lived in India, I think he could perceive that we were so overwhelmed with the move of cultures. You know, Nirmala and I also were part of the beginnings of Ananda in Europe, in Italy. And Nirmala more so than I. I came a few years after her, but this was in her case, mid-'80s, in my case, late 80s. But so we had at least a beginning of, you know, if you think of the geography of how you get to India, Italy is well on the way. Well, in more ways than one, Italy is well on the way to India. And so we had that time to at least get ourselves adjusted to, it ain't Kansas, honey. Things are a little different here. Get used to it, deal with it. But I think he could tell that when we got to India, because he stomped on the gas pedal so hard in India that our job was to try to keep the car on the road. And it was challenging to do so. And so he would, whereas his life in all these other decades was quite solitary, actually. He had people swirling around him, but he himself lived alone. Well, in India, that was not an option. So we were all jammed in a house together. First, it was called B 10 by 8, which was a very odd way of expressing it. B-10/8, that was the address of the first ashram house. 8 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, big, whacking, huge house. I think we got it for the basement because the basement had like 14-foot ceilings in between the beams and 12-foot ceilings under the beams. I mean, it was enormous. Anyway, that house we outgrew in 3 months. So we went down the street, we outgrew that house in another few months, and then we started buying the house that we ended up living in for the next 4 years, which he named Guru Kripa, Guru's Grace. And in that home, he was willing to celebrate Thanksgiving, for example. He was willing to celebrate Christmas, and even a few birthdays, not very many, but a few. And, you know, when Anand and Kirtani would come over from Europe, he would have Anand make pancakes for breakfast, so that there was a little bit of home feeling. He himself, I think, was in some ways off in the cosmos. I mean, his mind was ever on how can the work move forward in a new way. I don't think a day went by when he didn't think of some creative way to advance the work in some new, impossible way that someone else could help make manifest. And so he was willing, you know, when we tell stories about our time there with him, I sort of want to preface it by saying, yes, we were all in a house together. And I think he put up with it not because there was any sterling quality of us necessarily. We were willing to work hard and try hard to be in tune and to help the work move forward. But it was because the work needed to move forward, and he needed people to help do that. And it was also the time in his life when his body was beginning to fail, and he personally, on a human level, just needed more help and more support around him. But those years were amazing, and, you know, were the early, the birth, the infancy, you can say, of Ananda in India, Swamiji always looked at that as East meeting West. Master's own mission coming back to the land of his birth, his presence and his mission being made known. And that is always why we were there. It was never anything more personal than that in a very real sense. And it was incredible to be there and to sort of help in whatever ways we could do to make that possible.
So, Dharmadas just reminded me of so many different stories. I don't even know quite where to start, but maybe we'll start when we first got to India and we moved into that 10-by-8 house, and Swami lived on the top floor. It was like a little apartment, very cute, small, but he had it to himself. And every day he wanted to have a satsang. And so he would want us to find people to come to this satsang. And we knew nobody. We were pulling in the chowkidar and the taxi drivers and people off the street, trying to create a satsang. And finally, after a few days of this, he kind of got the idea, okay, once a week. We'll do this once a week. But he was ready. He was just pushing every minute. How do we get more people? How do we move this work forward? And the other thing I remember so well about that house is that we finally, Dharmadas installed a doorbell system so that there was a bell on Swami's side table that he could just push and it would ring in our room any time of the day or night. So it rang frequently, but this one time he was really, really sick. And he could hardly breathe, he could hardly move. And so we got on the phone with Dr. Peter. These are the symptoms, what should we do? And we decided to call the ambulance. So, as I said, he was on the top floor, and there was a long stairway down to the ground level with a huge drop right in the middle. All the floors, just huge drop. So what the ambulance guys did was strap him, very uncomfortable, onto a board. And then all the devotees in the house gathered around the stairway all the way down, and we handed him down all the way to the floor.
This is at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about awake and ready. I mean, there were some pretty sad faces, but
They were there.
they were there, and they were as awake and ready as you could be at that hour.
And some of them were living under the stairwell, so it wasn't a long commute for them.
Those of you who remember Dharma and Marlena, he was later in India called Dhananjay because Dharma and Dharmadas were a little too many Dharmas there. Swamiji remembering Dhananjay. Anyway, they used to live here in Palo Alto, or in the area here.
So anyway, we took him to the hospital, and Dharmadas stayed with him in the room, I'm pretty sure. But typical Swami, what he would remember in recounting that story is that they didn't run the siren on the ambulance. And so, whenever this would come up, we would pretend to be a siren, and we'd, give him his siren. But then Dharmadas, of course, staying in this hospital, it was a very fancy hospital, very good hospital. It had a dentist, it had a cardiologist, it had an eye doctor, it had everything. And we got to know the people very well because we were going there quite frequently with Swami. But the mosquitoes in the room at night, Dharmadas would just say he was there to attract all the mosquitoes. So Swami would not have to have those. And they were...
This one night, it was particularly virulent. I was trying to eke out a little bit of sleep. You know, he had an IV, you know, on a pole with wheels at the bottom, and so I would, when he needed to use the bathroom, we would go traipsing into the bathroom, and I sort of had to make sure none of the cables and cords got caught on things. But anyway, this one night I had covered my face because I knew I was just going to get eaten alive, but I couldn't cover my mouth. So I wake up in the morning and I've got mosquito bites on my lips and inside my nose. I was just like, oh, come on, you guys, cut me a little slack here.
We used to say they were very low-flying mosquitoes because they
couldn't take off after
tankers.
They had visited me, you know, the filling station. Anyway. Oh my God.
But that reminds me of another time when he had his cancer surgery. We had his room, which was a double room that he had to himself, and then there was an adjacent other room where Miriam and Dharmadas and I slept, so that, you know, we would be right there if he needed anything. And Hriman and Padma came to visit, and so we'd all take turns sort of guarding the door in the morning, because the tea walla at 6 a.m. wanted to make sure that the patient got their bed tea, even if they were sound asleep for the first time in hours, you know. But that tea walla was going to get in there. And so Hriman would just park himself right at the door, blocking the door, and keep that guy from disturbing Swami.
One of the nights, because of the time difference, somebody on the West Coast or somebody in India was always up at an odd hour to make a direct phone call. Well, we wanted to update Jyotish and Devi. So, you know, the hospital was laid out kind of in a big circle, and you could kind of make laps around the circle, walking around the rooms on a phone call in the hallway out there. And I was up at 5-something in the morning thinking, all right, I'm going to get ahead of this chaiwala and not let him, because, I mean, we had piled chairs in front of the door. We put tape. I mean, we tried everything. I mean, it was just like, no. He is a force of nature. Nothing is going to stop this guy. And I rounded the corner, and the time had gotten away from me, and this guy was like, you know, he was poised to grab that, and it was like, I grabbed this guy, no, stop. Oh my Lord. But in a way, we felt like we were sort of trying to do that all the time. In an odd sort of way, we were trying to keep India away from him enough that he could do the work he was trying to do. And it was a very awkward balance, because at the same time, we were trying to invite India, you know, appropriately to see him and to help. And, you know, many a satsang or many a question and answer session or individual tea that he would have with people, old friends perhaps, I would sit right next to him and I would translate, not from Hindi to English, not from Bengali to English, not from anything else to English, but just from English to English. Because either he couldn't hear very well, or he was not able to sort of work his way through the accent. And so I could just sort of help him understand a little better. And he didn't like it particularly well, but it was helpful, I think, to him. But he had a gift for being able to hear. I'll just digress momentarily. His hearing was an issue, And every year he would get a new set of hearing aids in America or somewhere else. And Italy, Switzerland, America, expensive hearing aids. We would adjust them. For a week or two, they were the best thing that ever happened, and then quickly it would sort of digress back to whatever it had been. But Swamiji had this blessing that when he really needed to hear, he could hear. He could hear pretty darn well. And he could hear things that people didn't necessarily pick up. He could hear better than you might think, in other words, is what I'm saying. And one of the ways that he could hear is he would pay attention to what people did. That's what he would really listen to. If their words equated to their actions, then he would start to listen to their words also. But initially, what he listened to was what they did. And sometimes people would get a little frustrated because they'd come in with this magnificent idea. Of course, everybody had a brilliant idea for what he could do to advance the work. Well, that wasn't the direction the river was trying to flow. He had already had plenty of ideas for how the work could grow that he was busy with. He wanted to get other people involved in the work. So he would, try to hand it back or try to steer it in another direction. But he was always pushing that in that direction.
When he had that cancer surgery, there's a picture of him as he's being wheeled into the operation room. And you would look at his face and just think he was going on vacation. He's just perfectly calm, perfectly centered. And that surgery was very painful, and he was in ICU afterwards. And I just remember him, we got to visit just for a couple minutes, just one person at a time for a little while there. And he would just say, he said to me, "I'm in so much pain. Can't you ask them to give me something?" And I had to explain, "Swami, you're not allowed to yet. You have to wait a little while." And then he said that to you. Why don't you say what he said?
Those moments were amazing because, if we think of all the years that we spent with Swamiji, collectively, very, very rarely did we have the chance to give him energy when he needed it in that moment and he was asking for it. Very seldom. I mean, yes, he wanted prayers. He was, if his body was ill, the healing prayer thing would go out. I mean, of course he was willing on that level, but in that moment of urgency in the ICU, I mean, one of the most unexpected things that he said was, he looked at me very deeply in the eyes. He said, "Everyone should have an experience like this." Now, you would think, good Lord, he did not wish cancer on everybody.
No.
He did not wish pain on everybody. But what I think he was saying is he was so much in Divine Mother's hands. He was literally on a drip. His stomach was completely shut down. So there was no, and he wasn't allowed anything in his mouth except the little, that little sponge thing, which just, it's like,
Was
let's just
annoying.
put some soap in your mouth or something. I mean, it just did almost nothing. I mean, yes, he could moisten up his lips a little bit. I mean, but it was, your mouth. I mean, it's like you want a little moisture in your mouth. Well, no. But what I think he was driving at is that complete vulnerability meant he was in the arms of the Divine Mother. And he could feel it. And he wanted that experience for everyone, to know that you are absolutely held in the arms of the Divine Mother. And it was an astonishing experience to see him that way, because it's like the body was kind of wiped away in a sense. And all you could see glowing there was the spirit, because the body was pretty well shut down at that point. And then he rebooted. And it was beautiful to see, the way the medical system there works. I mean, every other day, you put your credit card through the credit card machine. They do not let it build up to the end and find out that you're not going to pay. I mean, it's like you pay as you go. And the entire bill, 10 days, or was it 2 weeks? 10, 11 days, 5 of which were the ICU.
2 private rooms.
2 private rooms, $13,000, including the surgery.
I put it on my credit card.
We put it on the credit card and paid it off in 2 weeks.
And we even got a check from YSS.
YSS from Chandigarh sent a check for around $100 in rupees on stationary, YSS stationary, a YSS check. I mean, that was impressive because we couldn't use the minimal funds that we had in Ananda India, could not be directed personally. I mean, the government is very particular about that in this country too. It's kind of a universal thing, but
We fundraised for that, like,
people were,
nothing.
and they wrote a very sweet letter. You know, it was lovely. It was lovely to see. I'll just segue onto what Nirmala was saying earlier about the satsangs, where, you know, we were roping in anybody. I mean, the carpenter
beginning.
who's building the cabinets, hey, it's satsang time, get upstairs. You know, it's like.
But that carpenter, by the way, is still with the work. And now I think he's teaching classes
I
or
think
something.
he teaches. He's a Kriyaban. I mean, so
Yeah.
I mean, there were some really notable successes. People who really came along.
Another guard from that time is also still part of the work. Yeah, they were great friends.
But I'll just add, because it didn't, I mean, the satsang went from every day, and the attendance kind of started to shrink a little bit, and they said, okay, once a week. Okay, well, then the attendance was really good, because we timed it on a Saturday, I think, initially. And then we were preparing for the big launch of Conversations with Yogananda. That's the book that we published immediately on getting to India. And talk about, you know, fools rushing in where angels fear to tread. I mean, we just manifested a publishing house out of thin air. I mean, it's just like.
Well, we had Padma.
Well, we had Padma, but you know, we had no address, we had no checkbook, we had no, you know, it's just like we're paying the printer, print some books, get them done by the end of December, because Swami's talking at Fiki Hall, which is FICCI. It stands for something. One of you Indians will probably remember. But anyway, it's a nice, beautiful hall in Delhi. And we filled the hall, 700 people. This is early January. There's still posters around, you know, big full-size posters with that. And we go into that, and he speaks to 700 people. As we were walking out, he wanted to go where the books were, because we had now published the Conversations with Yogananda. Already in India was The Path, and 2 or 3 other books, Autobiography of a Yogi, etc. And he wanted to see the book sales, and he wanted to, you know, sort of mingle with the people a little bit there. Well, he was wearing a microphone kind of like I have, you know, so it's one of these wireless ones with the fancy bass. Well, we had rented one of those, and I knew we were on the hook for that if we didn't return it. So as he's walking up there, I'm reaching in his pocket to get that thing out and unhook it and make sure that it gets back where it's going. Okay, fine. Well, some other enterprising person decided, oh, well, let's see what else he's got in his pockets. And so somebody, while we're in this crush of people, everybody's diving at his feet. I mean, it was like a rock concert. 700 people just crammed into this little space, blocking the path forward. Somebody reached in his pocket, took out the thing,
The hearing aid
the
thing.
little the hearing aids controller, which he used to wear around his neck, but he had stuck it in his pocket for the function, and that just vaporized. I mean, that was gone, which meant he had no way to control the hearing aids. Anyway, it was like, and somebody thought they were getting a cell phone or something. I mean, what the heck were they going to do with it? But anyway.
There were so many times like that, big crush of people, and it would be Miriam, Nirmala, and Leela as bodyguards.
The big tough.
The big tough. Oh, boy. But everywhere he went, you know, he did all those television series 365 episodes.
Which came out of Fiki Hall, by the way. That's where I was going with that, is that the producer of that came to that lecture and contacted us afterwards, and very shortly we were filming those.
Yeah. I forget what I was going to say.
Sorry.
But another thing about those TV shows, I remember there was Sadhana Channel did a whole bunch, and then the Asta Channel did some. And when he finished 1 year's worth of one of those, the last one, I guess it was Asta by that time, everybody was, oh, congratulations, Swami, this is so amazing, you did this wonderful thing. And somebody put a garland around Swami, around his neck. And he was just very centered and thanking everybody. And then he just trundled off into his room, which was not very far away. And I kind of was walking after him. I did that a lot just to make sure he was okay. And he went right to the altar and took the garland off and gave it to Master. It's just so sweet. He just never, ever thought he had done anything. It was always Master who was doing it.
And people would touch his feet. I mean, I was saying that earlier about Fiki Hall, but I mean, it would happen anywhere.
He was a celebrity after those TV shows.
And yeah, any city that we went, people would see him on the street and they would stop him and say,
I saw you on Asta Channel.
I mean, it was, because if you looked at those programs, you had one flavor. I mean, you'd had different faces, but you basically had one flavor. And as far as I could tell, that flavor was called fundamentalist. It was the rah, 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 people hollering at the camera and shaking their fist. And it was all in Hindi. And then on comes Swamiji. And, and the challenge was to sort of nudge him towards the prime time, which was around 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the night, was when people would watch that kind of program. And if we got him on that program at that hour, which we did quite a few times, for years running, people saw it, and they saw it all over the country. And it just, it made an enormous difference, because everywhere he went, he was seen. And he had us record music for those programs, and he handpicked which music he wanted to go with all of them. And we recorded an album. Initially, this was in February of 2004, with Ananda and Kirtani and Leela, Nirmala and myself, 5 of us. And we had, Swamiji wanted things done now.
Yesterday,
preferably. And so we found this recording studio. It was an hour away from Gurgaon, hour and a half even. We drove up there, and it was okay. The guy was quite capable. And we had one day to record this album. It took us 2 hours to get the first song, get the balance right, get everything figured out. And I thought, oh my Lord, we're never going to make it. And then boom, 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 boom. We did, 20 more songs before the day was over. And that became Philosophy in Song. And one more day for the guy to mix it and us to go back and fine-tune a few last things. And then he gave us the master. And we took that on a trip down to Goa, Swamiji, and he had a CD player in the room, and we played that album over and over and over again. And any mistake on that album got highlighted. It's like, don't sing it that way. Give you an example. I sang, walk like a man, walk like a man. I closed the N too soon. And, I did it the right way, because I biled in so many times how to do it the right way. I couldn't even do it the wrong way, but anyway. But there were lots of little things like that. But he was very sweet about it, and I think maybe what he appreciated even more than whatever musical quality we could bring to the album was that we tried really hard. Our group was very sweet, very harmonious, very, Ananda and Kirtani are saints. I mean, it's just, it had a lovely energy to it, and we got it done in one day, which warmed his heart. I'll tell you the only time that we truly pleasantly surprised Swamiji. Truly, I could almost say we knocked his socks off. This is before we were in India. We were working, publishing the books. Nirmala did the design, I did the typesetting and production, and then, off the book went to the publisher. Well, we had discovered, this is in the late 90s, a company that would do on-demand printing. And so on-demand meant you could get one book and you could get it really fast. Really fast meant Sean drove the manuscript and the disc, with the data, the printout and the data, right to the airport in Sacramento, right to the FedEx plane. I mean, I swear, I think he almost went up the gangplank and handed it to somebody. Anyway, on a Thursday afternoon, we finished it at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon or 4 in the afternoon. He zoomed off to the airport, caught the last FedEx plane, headed for Memphis. The printing house was in Memphis or in that area. Monday morning, we had a finished book. And Monday afternoon, we presented him a book. And that was like, okay.
That's how it's
so
supposed
let's
to be.
do it again. He never missed a beat on something like that. It was like, okay, well, now that's the new standard, so let's go up from there.
Well, he actually you did start doing it because he started typesetting books in a book format, and then he just printed out that way so it looked like a book. That's what he needed to see. Swami needed to see
One of the
that.
little dynamics, Swami was an incredible perfectionist with his editing. And one of the things that would happen that was, terrifying was you would hand him a new book, and not one book, but I mean one book out of like 3,000 that we had just printed.
And you had the 5-minute test.
And sometimes you couldn't even pass the 5-second test. And usually if it's the 5-second test, it's something we screwed up. If it was the 5-minute or 1 hour test, it would be, he'd find something he didn't like about the way he wrote something. But I mean, he could find the one mistake in the middle of the book
The
that
one typo.
I had screwed something up on the typesetting. And so what we started doing was we would typeset every chapter, one chapter at a time. And by golly, he wanted to see everything. He wanted to see the footnotes all done up the way they should be at the bottom of the page. And I would work with him. He was in Italy, I was in California, up at Ananda Village. He would send the next chapter, and I tried my best, night or day, to get it back to him in a half an hour, typeset and done. And then he would look through it and read it like he was reading a book, because it really made a big difference to him. Going from manuscript to book was a very different look and feel for him. And so, then he'd fire back a new manuscript for that chapter, and I would typeset it again. And we sometimes went through that 5 or 10 times per chapter until and he had already edited his own work, God knows, 10, 20, 30 times before that point. But the finer side he wanted to do with a manuscript in hand.
He was the best boss I have ever had. And working with him was just the most fun because he was the most fun person ever to be around. He was also extremely demanding, and pretty humiliating sometimes too, because he was always trying to see what you were made of and what you were going to do. And I remember this one time, well, I should preface it by saying one of the first interactions he ever had with me when I was first at Ananda was he came up to me in the Expanding Light Temple after a program, apropos of nothing as far as I could tell, but he came up to me and he put his hands on my shoulders and looked me right in the eye and said, "Even-minded and cheerful. Like, get this into your concrete skull." And it just, well, it really, I still remember it quite vividly to this day. So I think he was trying to see how I was progressing and testing those limits. I remember there were two bad boys at Ananda, and they were both working in crystal clarity, and they are no longer there. They just kind of pushed it over the edge, but they were sort of, I think they must have been relatives of Swami's in a past life, because he was very lenient with them. And so I remember we were walking down the hallway in Swami's apartment down below Crystal Hermitage, and they didn't like me, and they made some snide remark about me, and Swami snickered, and he looked at me like, but not that much. It was like, "So what do you think of that? I'm making fun of you." And I remember I felt like bursting into tears because it was just so rude, and those bad boys were really bad. But instead, I went outside, I went by the pool, I just sat there for a minute, and then I came back in, and I just pretended nothing had happened. And it was like, okay, just getting better. But he was always testing the limits. He was always, I remember so many times, there was another fellow that I worked with, and he and I were working on a project. We were down in Swami's apartment, just the three of us, Swami and this fellow and I. And Swami said something to this guy, "You are just the best." I think it was like choir director. "Okay, you're just the best choir director." Looked at me. "What do you think of that?" Didn't do that, just energetically. And I could feel in myself, "Are you kidding? This guy is a jerk." But mentally, I said, "Get over yourself." And I just said, "You're the best," to this guy. And then we both left. And I get home and the phone rings. I didn't really mean that. I did. And I said, "Swami, there's 100 people better than me, 1,000 million people better than me. I'm just doing the best I can." And so it was a struggle, it was definitely a struggle, and he was in your face all the time, but he was also on your side. There was a time when a different bad boy, who's no longer in Ananda, was working in Crystal Clarity, I think. It was before you and I were working there, or anyway, I get times mixed up, but I remember the guy. And I was working in town, and he asked me to pick up a book order or some order from town. It was over $400. And this was in the time when that was a whole lot of money. But I said I would do it. I picked it up. I paid for it. And I brought it to the office, and I asked for reimbursement, and he laughed in my face. "You don't think I was really going to pay you back?" And I was just stunned. I mean, I didn't have that kind of money to just not have. And so that afternoon, I went to Swami. I was working with him, and I said, you know what he did? He stiffed me for that $400. And Swami pulled out his checkbook, wrote me a check, gave it to me right then. He was always taking care of us. And I don't know what happened to that guy, but he's no longer an Ananda.
I'll segue onto the thought of he was seeing what we were made out of. This is in reference to Palo Alto, actually, as it happens. So we had, because we were tagging along with Swami all around the world, whether it was Europe or America, come summer, we only did one summer in Delhi. One summer was quite enough. After that, we took at least a month away, and sometimes a little more traveling to Europe or America. So anyway, we had flown all the way from India to America, landed in San Francisco. Swamiji was staying at Chela Bhavan, and we were staying somewhere else nearby in Ananda Palo Alto. And this was a Saturday afternoon that we landed. Swamiji, in his inimitable way, wanted to have tea with everyone, so a tea was had. We were there at the tea in Chela Bhavan with a group of very enthusiastic people, all of us starting to fade, as you would when you've flown for 22 hours from Delhi. And the following morning was Sunday morning. Now, Asha was queued up to give Sunday service here, and, which was obviously perfectly appropriate. Swamiji woke up in the morning and said, go get Dharmadas and Nirmala, have them do the Sunday service. And so
Definitely at our best.
Asha, yeah, at our finest. So she came out, we were sound asleep. I mean, we were not even on the continent yet. And she pried us out of bed, and we got toddled over here, and here we are again. So I mean, hopefully everyone survived the experience. But anyway,
It was a great service, I remember.
were you okay? Good. Anyway, it was. So I want to tell a story that I think relates to David and Anaya now that she's piped up. So I titled this story Swamiji and the Windshield Wiper. So we're in Italy, and I want to say this is 1999, like right before the end of the year, right before Y2K, the big, for those with long memories. Anyway, we were in Italy with Swamiji in December, and we were driving, I was driving his car, and Kirtani and Nirmala were in the back seat, and Swamiji was in the front seat. It was nighttime, and it was a driving rainstorm. And we're driving from Perugia to Assisi along that road to Bastia and all. And the driver's side, right in front of me, windshield wiper, pew, just goes sailing right over the top of the car, gone. So now I have this thing, scraping a hole in the windshield, doing nothing for the visibility whatsoever. So I got out of the car, we pulled over, I moved the passenger side to the driver's side, and they more or less matched. So at least I had something, and made his so it wasn't going to kill the window. Swamiji said, well, I know the place where I bought this car, and it's not terribly far, so let's just go there. Well, it's dark, it's, 6:30 in the evening, something like that. We went there, and the owner was there. It was clear that, Mama had pasta on at home, and then dinner time was coming, and, he was kind of eager to get out of there. But we started talking, the windshield wiper, et cetera. Swamiji noting that the exact same car that he owned and had bought new from that same dealer was sitting right there, and we could exchange windshield wipers from that one to this one. It's like, oh, no, can't be done. This guy kind of like the terrible twos where the little kid learns the word no. It was like he was really practiced on the word no. He was really good at that. Anyway, well, Swamiji very quickly figured out that force was not going to work with this guy. So you see this little twinkle in his eye. And he called, Dharmadas, come. I don't even know if I was Dharmadas yet at that time, but anyway, he pulls me over and he starts showing me these brochures of vans, really nice transit vans, you know, the kind that have like 4 rows of seats in the back.
Very
And
expensive.
very expensive, very nice. I have been telling Anand that we need one of these at the center. What do you think? And it was like, well, yeah, Swamiji, we need, you know. Well, the light bulb went off over this guy's head at a certain point. A, the pasta was going to, you know, he was going to be late for the pasta. That was point A. Point B was business was going to go out the door if he didn't like respond appropriately. He said, oh, you could come tomorrow. Yeah, well, Swamiji had a class tomorrow. No, it's not convenient to come tomorrow. Okay, well then why don't we just change the wiper from this car to that car? Thank you, Tom. And the reason this ties to David and Anaya is that I believe that van I'm sure the van got bought, but I think it's the same van that you all took on your music tour from here to everywhere.
Because Swami lightly twisted the arm of someone in a meeting and said, you can't go to Italy to sing, but would you donate money to my and this man very generously said yes, and so that's how that band ended up.
There you go. So anyway,
Always plotting.
he had this amazing way of connecting dots in really unusual, unexpected ways to help make things happen and bring energies together that might not otherwise have, you know, you wouldn't necessarily I mean, he would send people off on a mission from God and you would think, good Lord, those two? You know, Haridas and Vijay to Sacramento. I mean, it's like, you know, Haridas finally figured out, or maybe they both figured out that there can be 2 God's wills. You know, it's like, I mean, you know, impossible combinations, but we would all learn what can work, what really doesn't work. And, you know, everybody grows, the work itself develops. We used to joke that due to our karma, you know, or whatever sins we had committed, sooner or later we would be sent to start the Ananda Siberia Center. And then, lo and behold,
We found ourselves
we
there.
inaugurated the Ananda Siberia Center. We actually cut the ribbon on the Ananda Siberia Center. This lady, wonderful devotee there, had purchased quite a lovely yoga center on the order of the size of the yoga center, yoga studio you have here. You know, around that size. They bought an entire flat, dedicated it for Ananda Yoga and meditation, and lo and behold, we were the ones to go there and dedicate it. Anyway, be careful what you say, even joking. Oh
And
my God.
there are wonderful devotees in Russia. We haven't really connected with them too much except on WhatsApp once in a while, but, you know, pray for those devotees there. It's a very difficult situation.
And Ukrainian ones too. Lovely, lovely, deep souls. Wonderful, wonderful devotion. We had people, we had a couple who traveled 3 days on a train
With a baby.
with a little infant baby, to come to a Kriya. They took Kriya, they stayed for the review, they got back on the train to go 3 more days back to the, you know, 3 days only gets you halfway across Russia. You know, it's not even like you're all the way to the other side. I mean, it's a long, long way.
The baby was in the ceremony, so the youngest Kriyaban ever.
Right. Baby did very well in the ceremony too.
So do you all have questions for us? Anything come to mind that you would like to ask us about? Yeah.
These are wonderful stories. Thank you.
if either of you could answer this one, what do you think Swami most was training you to become or to improve, in your nature? What do you think were sort of the maybe most foundational things?
Well, even-minded and cheerful was a good one. Yeah.
I think leadership and just to try to reach for his vision for the work, his expansiveness, because both of us can zero in on details pretty quickly. Not that either of us particularly enjoyed details, but there are a lot of details to keep track of, and he himself could do it too.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have the view from 35,000 feet, from 3 million feet. He could have the view from 3 inches, as was required. But I think, the truest way to answer the question is just to say he was training us to realize God, and anything along the way that could help. The music was so central to our lives. I mean, we were singing Swamiji's music all from the 70s, literally. And I mean, I wore out the first tape that I had. For those who have a very long memory, you can think all the way back to Into the Magic was a wonderful tape that Nirmala was involved in producing. Well, this was the tape that preceded Into the Magic, and I wore the thing out. I used to sit in Arjuna's pickup truck with the tape player, because cassette players were beyond my means and budget, but I could just sit there and play the thing, and I learned, Well Done, Lord. I really loved Well Done, Lord, the song, and I learned exactly how long you have to hold the rewind button to get back to the beginning of Well Done, Lord, so you can hear it again. I was on repeat of Well Done, Lord. Anyway, but I just feel like he trained. He himself would say, I'm not trying to convert anyone to anything except their own higher self. And so I guess the broadest way to answer it is he was just trying to help us peel away whatever wasn't supposed to be there. And yeah, he could be rough. He could be blunt when the occasion required, and he let you know what was missing.
I remember one time we had visited him in Assisi, and those trips usually had what we realized in hindsight, they had a pivotal conversation, like you had gone the whole way just for that 10 minutes. That was really important. And we were standing in the kitchen, we were just about to leave, and Swami just lit into me. You have to understand what people's natures are. You have to work with their nature. And I think it might be the same fellow that he was talking about, because I wasn't working well with him. And I said, well, Swami, what about my nature? And he said, you can't afford to have a nature. Okay. And I think also what he was trying to get us, free from all these entanglements and stuff that holds us back. And I remember he also, I think, wanted us to see that it's not that hard. Because I remember one time he had been in seclusion, and he came in and said, Nirmala, Hong Saw, you can find God with Hong Saw. I was like, oh my God, I don't even do Hong Saw anymore. I have Kriya, that's baby Kriya. And it was like, okay, I think I better do Hong Saw again. So all the techniques that we have, they all lead there. There's a whole buffet table of wonderful techniques, any one of which, chanting, anything, will get you there. So any other questions or things you'd like to ask?
Doing very well, thank you. It's it doesn't bend quite as much as the left-hand one, but it's on the mend, and progress is being made. So, and you know, I
Thank
can
you for all your prayers.
chisel my way through playing a song on the guitar from time to time. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been an adventure. You know, Swamiji showed us from his own example that it just didn't, whatever the body was missing, you know, he would fall over and he couldn't walk very well, or he just, the list of things that he struggled with physically, I mean, you could just start writing and never stop. My Lord, it just was endless.
The doctors would look at the, what do they call it, the medical report, and they'd look at it and look at him. How are you even alive?
He'd ask, how are you? Fine, I'm fine. It's like, okay. People didn't know what to make of it. But he just, you know, there was a period of time when he had made out his will. This was in India, and he had to have a medical power of attorney in India because we were far away from here. So I signed up for, you know, I mean, he asked me to do that. So for a little while there, for those years, if something had happened to him, I would have been the one to sort of theoretically say yay or nay. I mean, Miriam was much more involved in the medical side of things, but I just remember him saying, you know, there is no point to my life if I cannot serve. That was the line that he drew in the sand. So if I go beyond that line and you can't draw me back in front of that line to where I can serve again, then you have to let me go. Don't keep the body around just for the sake of breathing and functioning, but not existing, but not living. So I really appreciated that frankness that he just, I mean, the reason I even thought of it was after Swamiji left the body, like a month later, I had told my dad within 24 hours, because my dad knew him a little bit. They spent some very lovely time together. And my dad was sympathetic, but at one point he said, well, I bet there's going to be a big fight over his will. And it was like, oh my God, I have his will. And it didn't even occur to me, gee, this thing should be in the museum, or it should be Jyotish and Devi. You know, it doesn't belong with me. So Jyotish and Devi, let me bring this thing over to you. I was like, get it out of my hands. But I mean, I had to try to explain to my dad, good heavens, he had given everything away. And the small handful of things that he had personally, like a bangle, like a Navaratna. I mean, there was just, I don't know, 5 things, something like that, he specifically gave. You know, the bangle to Seva, the Navaratna to the next spiritual director, Jyotish. I mean, he had it in a very organized way. But the whole purpose was to serve. And he said, if I can't serve, then you have to let me go. And of course, as we know, he served right into the last hour. Was composing an email to someone and then was gone within minutes. So amazing.
Someone in India, when we were there, asked me, so what powers does your Swami have? And I answered him by saying, well, he has the power to have created a harmonious community, and a large community all over the world where people actually live together without fighting over the will, without acrimonious behavior. And of course, that person didn't think that mattered, but I think it's the hardest power of all to have, to be able to, through your vibration, create harmony. And that's what Swami did everywhere. We would go into hotels or out for dinner or something like that, and Swami would just attract people. They would just say, I saw you on Asta Channel or this, but they would come up and just want to tell them their problems or anything, just like a bee to honey.
Yeah, lots of people who never saw him on any television program or anything, they could tell that there's something special here. There's a very special energy. There was a very giving energy, and they were drawn by it. It was very palpable, very tangible.
Any other questions? Yes?
Do you have a song or a chant that is you enjoy sharing the most, and why?
Well, Swami's hearing, as Dharmadas alluded, was difficult for him. And then he had Meniere's disease after a while, and so he just really struggled with not being able to hear. I remember one time early on when I was working for him, I went into his office and he had Rhapsody in Blue, you know, that song that United Airlines has ruined forever. It was a beautiful piece of music. But he had it on so loud that I had to do this. I couldn't even stand to be in the room. But anyway, as his hearing diminished, he would often ask me to chant. And I would always play Door of My Heart because that was his favorite. And so that was very special to me. I don't think I can do the non-guitar version.
Okay. For me, the song the first song that I ever heard of Swamiji's was Walk Like a Man. and it came in as the first song of the first Sunday service that I ever attended, which was the Sunday right at the end of Spiritual Renewal Week in 1979. And so that song has always been very near and dear to my heart, because the very first words of the song, walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Well, I was alone I was alone in a community, but I had just arrived in a community by myself, where I basically knew no one at that point. And why court approval once the road is known? Well, it was very much part of my temperament at that point to not court approval once the road was known. It was like said to my family, bye. And let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you, go on alone. And I tell you, they had not finished the first verse and tears were running down my cheeks. And I thought, I'm home. Just done, sealed, and delivered. I hadn't even finished my first weekend and I was home. And that song has always stayed near and dear to my heart, and it continues. Follow your dream. Well, I'll just sing it. Let's just sing it. Can you toss the words up there? Forgive the guitar here. I just put new strings on it, so they sound great, but they're not always in tune. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Follow your dream, though it lead to worlds unknown. Life's but a shadow once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not our own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart. Bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving. All this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Go on alone. Go on alone. I'll just say a few more words and then we should probably wrap up. But, anything that I ever could bring to the work or to Swamiji in terms of attunement was due to his music. And I just loved his music. It spoke to me and continues to, and I just kept digging, diving, probing, singing. I suppose almost everyone here has heard the little aphorism that Swamiji would sometimes share publicly. If you want to know me, listen to my music, because you can hear and you can feel who he is through his music. Well, I always felt or came to feel later on that if you want to actually feel what it's like to be Swami Kriyananda, then sing his music, or allow that music to, perform his music, or allow that music to move through you in a vibrational way, because it will change your molecules. It will absolutely rearrange your consciousness completely. And, it's not like anyone has to be a virtuoso. I mean, everybody knows how to operate the CD player or the MP3 player on your phone or whatever it is. It's not that complicated. And to just keep vibrating in that energy. Nirmala talked about the siddhi, the power that Swamiji had being to create this community, to create, not just this community here in Palo Alto, but this community on this planet of higher consciousness moving towards the light. Well, a lot of that power moved through the music because it's, Swamiji himself would say, Gregorian chant is what held the church together in the dark ages in Kali Yuga. Gregorian chant chanted in monasteries. It had this power to glue the consciousness to something that vibrated on a higher level. And, it's lovely. Gregorian chant even enjoyed a certain renaissance in the last few decades with popular recordings of it. But it was always a little too Kali Yuga for Swamiji, and he wrote this wonderful music. And it's just one of the greatest blessings of our lives to have shared it, and to have shared it all over India. I used to travel. I point to this guitar. Christian is working on my guitar, but my guitar is basically identical to this one. All over India with that guitar. And, guitars in India are a little bit of a non sequitur. Yes, there's, people do hear guitar music, but they don't hear it quite like that. But everybody could vibrate with it somehow. People could feel it, they could get it. And they may not understand all the words, you'd have to go through it very carefully and slowly. We sang it in Russia. Same thing, oh my Lord, sometimes in Russia it would take 10 minutes just to run through the translation of the song the first time, and then, we would sing it, and people would sort of follow along with it. But it has the power to transform lives. We sang Swamiji's music to the Pope in the Vatican in front of 13,000 people, and people were very moved by it. People were very touched by it, and so just an incredible blessing. I always felt, I'll just finish answering your question by saying, Swamiji wrote Love as a Magician back in the mid-90s for the Mystic Harp albums. And Mystic Harp, or was it? Yeah. And when he wrote that song, on a certain level, I think
Wait a minute, I don't think it was on.
Maybe it was Windows on the World.
Yeah.
I think it came a little later. But anyway, it's like that was his ticket to freedom, because it's like he gathered up all the lifetimes that led to this one, and he put it all into a song. And it finishes with the words, "What a fool was I to turn away." Because in a way, that's what all the other lifetimes amounted to. What a fool I was to turn away, and blast it all. Why do I keep doing it? I'm not going to do it again. We've all, I think, heard him tell the story of, smoking is the easiest habit to give up. I've done it 1,000 times. But in Swamiji's case, every time he would slip or whatever, he would say, I have not yet succeeded. Okay? And if you stop the sentence right there, there's an echo. There's an unspoken subtitle that comes next. And the next words are, but I will. And in the case of Love as a Magician, what a fool was I to turn away, but I never will again. And he never did again. And, we could all do a lot worse than that. I mean, and he gave us all of this, and Master too gave us all of what he gave, not to show, greatness, mightiness, impossible to follow or tune into. He gave it to us as a challenge to say, so now you go and do better. Don't just equal what I did. Go over the top of it somehow. I mean, it's a heck of a high mountain to climb. But he wasn't trying to intimidate us with it. He was just trying to encourage us and just say, go, you can do it. You too can do this. And, sometimes he did it. Those of you who knew David Miller will appreciate this particular phraseology. David Miller said, in reference to some, when they worked together on the music in the 1990s, David was always having to correct something because that's just the nature of these things. And David said, he applied the boot of wisdom to my seat of understanding. And, he could do that, and he did do that. But it wasn't like he did it because that was his preferred method of communication. He just did it when he had to and, kept moving us along. Sometimes when we were sort of kicking and screaming or being babies or whatever, but he just never gave up so that we could just never give up. And here we all are.